What up, what up? This is Adam Johnson back again with another Basketball Pantheon video. We are going through another division. So far we have done the Central Division and the Pacific Division for all-time rosters. Just kind of a quick reminder of what we're doing. Basically, I've gone through and just created every team's all-time roster, and you can see some of the other teams we've done so far. Here's the Clippers. This is one we've done to the last. To our best of our ability. Obviously, there's some players that are current, so we just did that. And it's the peak season with that team. And remember, no duplicates. So let's go ahead and get right into it. The Southeast Division. First team up is the Atlanta Hawks. So what I'll do with this video is, if you haven't seen the previous two, I'll tell you the player and then what year we chose to represent his best of his career. And then, I'll kind of go through the rotation and maybe why we chose this player for this team. First up is Bob Pettit, probably the Hawks' all-time best player. They gave him a 93 overall. This is back in the St. Louis Hawks days. Last year, if you try to create Bob Pettit, they would not allow the name Pettit, saying it was inappropriate language, which was very, very annoying. So you had to kind of go around it. So really dumb. But this is the 1959 version of Bob Pettit. Next up, Dominique Wilkins. 1986 version of Dominique Wilkins. This was easy. He was on the game, so we just traded him over. Pete Maravich, also on the game. Pretty simple. This is the 1974 version. I believe it's the 71 version on the game, so we made him slightly better and moved him over from that team. Lenny Wilkins. This was a edited player off of another player template. But yeah, fully deserved to be on this team. We're actually going to play Pete Maravich at the 2 and Lenny Wilkins at the 1. This is the 1968 version of Lenny Wilkins. Paul Millsap. Current version of Paul Millsap. Obviously, now I guess a four or five-time All-Star. So this 2017 version of Paul Millsap. Lou Hudson. He was on the old school Hawks roster for the 71 season. This is a 1970 version of Lou Hudson. Al Horford, moved him back over from the Celtics. Al Horford, great career with the Hawks. Probably going to end up having his number retired. Definitely deserved to be on this team. Steve Smith, another one, didn't have to create. He was on the 2000 Blazers. All we had to do was trade him. And he'll probably act as the sixth man for this team, most likely, him or Lou Hudson. Bill Bridges also made the roster. And this is the 1968 version of Bill Bridges. Dan Roundfield, another creative player. Had one random All-NBA season back in the day with the Hawks, and so he deserved to be on this team. So this is a 1980 version of Dan Roundfield. Josh Smith, not currently in the league, but he was in the free agent pool, so put him back on the Hawks. Had some borderline All-Star seasons, never actually made a team, but thought he deserved it. So this is the 2010 version of Josh Smith. Mookie Blaylock, creative player. Really disappointed that he wasn't on the game, because he was a heck of a player and will definitely play some time behind Lenny Wilkins at point guard. But this is a 1994 version of Mookie Blaylock. Doc Rivers was on the game. Rivers and Mookie will kind of battle for that backup point guard spot. This is the 1987 version of Doc Rivers, so a little bit better than the 86 version. Kyle Korver, 2015 version, his All-Star season, his lone All-Star season. Obviously now he's a member of the Cavs, but this was pretty easy. Just Kyle Korver back on the Hawks. Kevin Willis, he's on the game in multiple forms, but we use that Hawks version, obviously, and this is the 1992 version of Kevin Willis. So that rounds out the roster. Let's go ahead and look at the rotation, kind of how this is going to play out. So Lenny Wilkins will be the point guard, Pete Maravich shooting guard, Dominique Wilkins, Bob Pettit, and Al Horford. Really awesome starting lineup there. That's going to be really fun to play with. Off the bench will be Paul Millsap, Lou Hudson, Steve Smith, Mookie Blaylock, Josh Smith, Dan Roundfield, Bill Bridges, Kyle Korver, and then in reserves is Doc Rivers and Kevin Willis. Really, really fun team. It has a kind of a long history of what I think some people would think of mediocrity, but they actually are the second longest. They have the second longest playoff streak right now behind the San Antonio Spurs. And granted, they never really go that deep other than 2015, going to the conference finals, but they have a championship in their background when Bob Pettit led them. So, better players than people would think for the Atlanta Hawks. But let's go ahead and get to the next team. The Miami Heat, who have worse players than you would think. Now, this team was really hurt by the no duplicates rule, and I think they'll actually struggle to score outside of Dwayne Wade. The starting lineup is nice, and then the rest of the bench is one of the weaker benches probably in this whole thing that we've created. So let's go ahead and go through the Heat's roster. So obviously no LeBron James and no Shaq, because Shaq's on the Lakers, LeBron's on the Cavs, and those seemed fitting. Those are guys who are better with those teams, and we had to kind of bend some stuff, and as you'll see in a second. But here's Dwayne Wade, best player in Heat's history, leading scorer. Obviously deserved to be on the team. This is the '06 version of Wade. '06 version's on the game. Very easy. Alonzo Mourning, we decided to put him on the Heat rather than the Hornets. So we traded the Hornets version of Alonzo Mourning. This is the 2000 version of Alonzo Mourning. Tim Hardaway, going to be your starting point guard. This is the 1997 version of Tim Hardaway with his killer crossover. Hassan Whiteside, this is the current version of Hassan Whiteside. I think he's slightly overrated on the game, but that's okay. He deserves to make the team. Glenn Rice, this is one of the ones we had to bend a little bit. He's probably had better seasons with the Hornets, but the Hornets were kind of loaded at that wing position. The Heat were not. They needed a starting small forward, so I was like, let's just use the 1995 Heat season of Glenn Rice and go ahead and put him on the Heat. Ronnie Cycli, DJ Ronnie Cycli. This is an edited player off of one of the kind of classic players, and we figured he'd be kind of hard to create, and it doesn't look great, but it's fine. So this is the 1994 version of Ronnie Cycli. Eddie Jones, underrated player historically, but this is the 04 version of Eddie Jones. Sherman Douglas, this is a creative player. Probably gonna act as the backup point guard most likely, and unless we play D Wade at point guard a lot, down the stretch, that'll probably happen. But Sherman Douglas, this is a 1991 version of Sherman Douglas. Antoine Walker, another one. Obviously had better seasons with the Celtics, but he was never ever ever gonna get in the game on that Celtics team, that loaded Celtics teams that we'll get to when we get to the Atlantic Division. So I was like, let's just put him on the Heat, where he actually has a chance to play, and so this is the 2006 version of Antoine Walker, who was on the game, so that was easy. Udonis Haslem, higher up on the Heat leaderboards in more categories than people would think, and he's probably going to start at power forward for this team, so that just kind of shows the lack of depth of these guys, and again, multiple people who've had better seasons with other teams, and so they didn't quite make it on this team, but this is the 2005 version of Udonis Haslem. Goran Dragic, current version of Goran Dragic. Decided to put him on the team. They need to fill out the roster. Justice Winslow, again, you can see here at the back of the bench how hard it was to fill out the Heat's roster without using duplicates. So Goran Dragic, Justice Winslow, both the current version of them. James Posey was on the championship team in 06, so we decided to put him on the team. He's not on the game, so I had to create him, and I put him on the 06 Heat and on this team. Mario Chalmers, again, just not a lot to choose from. This is the 2013 version of Mario Chalmers. Brian Grant, played for multiple teams. This is the 01 version of Brian Grant, and this is probably the worst player that's going to be in this whole league, I would guess. 73 overall, not great. So here's how the rotational look. This team again is just going to struggle a little bit, I think. Other than they do have some nice top end talent, but 81 is your starting power forward. That's pretty weak compared to some of these other teams. Like for instance, the Lakers' worst starting player, I believe, is 92 overall. So yeah, that's that'll be tough for them. So Tim Hardaway, Dwayne Wade, Glenn Rice, Udonis Haslem, and Alonzo Mourning will be the starters. Hassan Whiteside off the bench, Eddie Jones, Ronnie Cycli, Antoine Walker, Sherman Douglas, Goran Dragic, Mario Chalmers, and James Posey with Justice Winslow and Brian Grant in reserves. And this could really go either way here. Neither is lighting the world on fire in this tournament. So there's your Miami Heat. Next team in the Southeast Division, coincidentally, next on the alphabetical order. So this is the Charlotte Hornets, another one of the weaker teams. So Hornets and Heat, and granted, both of them came in late. They don't have really storied histories other than the Heat. The Big Three era and the 06 title. Their franchise histories just aren't very long. So you only have 25 years really to work with. It's tough to build out a 15-man roster out of that without using any duplicates. So here's what we came up with for the Charlotte Hornets. And their history is a little odd too. You have to kind of take into consideration. So 88 to basically 02 is like the original Charlotte Hornets. And now the Pelicans have, from when they moved in the 02, 03 range to current, that'd be like the Pelicans, whereas the Charlotte Hornets, now their history assumes the Bobcats history plus the current Hornets plus 88 through 02. So there's like a year-long gap basically where like the Charlotte Hornets weren't in existence technically in the record books. It's kind of confusing. So the Charlotte Hornets consist of like 88 to 02 and then like 04 to now. So it also kind of like engulfs the Bobcats era. So yeah, just kind of now you can see like our methods and how he chose some of these guys. So Larry Johnson's the best player. This is the 1993 version of Larry Johnson. Kemba Walker, current version of Kemba Walker. And honestly, we might make him a tad better because, like I mentioned on the other videos, we're going to make them what they are. When you edit these rosters, they don't do updates. Obviously, naturally, this is kind of like a local roster saved file. So they don't update like they do if you were just to like play with Kemba Walker right now. So he's actually a little bit better. So we might make him better before the tournament actually starts. Al Jefferson, the 2014 version of Al Jefferson. Gerald Wallace, this is a creative player. Had an All-Star season in 2010, so that's the one we went with. So yeah, there's Gerald Wallace. Anthony Mason. One we had to just kind of like choose between, do we go Knicks? He's not going to play much there. So it's like, how about the Heat? No. How about the Hornets? He'll play the most there. Kind of tough to choose from. But this is a 1997 version of Anthony Mason. Steven Jackson, another creative player. Thought we did a decent job with this one. This is also the 2010 version of Steven Jackson, the year the Bobcats made the playoffs. So Gerald Wallace and Steven Jackson was kind of their wing rotation. So thought they should be on there. Nicholas Batum, this is the 2016 version of Nick Batum. He's been a little bit worse this year, so we kept him at 2016 levels. Kendall Gill, for whatever reason, they do not let me edit his number to match what it actually is, and he's going to be stuck with number 12. So this is Kendall Gill, and what season we choose for him? 1992. He may actually start. I don't know. We haven't decided the starting lineup for this team now. Michael Kidd Gilchrist, 2017 version of MKG. Muggsy Bogues. We changed this season a little bit because I think it's the 93 Hornets that are on the game. We gave Muggsy Bogues the 1995 version, so he's a little bit better on this than he is on the 93 Hornets. Del Curry. Why not? Could use some shooting. So 1994 version of Del Curry. Boris Diaw, also on that Bobcats, the 2010 Bobcats playoff team. Definitely wasn't going to make the cut with the Spurs or the Suns, so we put him on the Hornets. This is the 2010 version of Boris Diaw. Eldon Campbell, not good, but needed to fill out the roster. Needed a 13th player, so this is the 02 version of Eldon Campbell. He was on the game. I could have chosen another player from maybe right now, or even like Courtney Lee from last year, but again, that's just kind of how hard it was to build the depth of some of these teams that haven't been around as long. So here's the rotation. Kemba Walker, point guard. Kendall Gill, shooting guard. This could also be Steven Jackson, or, we can play around with it. Gerald Wallace, Larry Johnson, Al Jefferson. And then off the bench is Anthony Mason, Steven Jackson, Nick Batum. Let's see what that looks like right now. So, yeah, that probably looks better. Steven Jackson, Gerald Wallace, Larry Johnson, Al Jefferson, Anthony Mason, Kendall Gill, Nick Batum, Michael Kidd Gilchrist, Del Curry, Muggsy Bogues, Boris Diaw, and Eldon Campbell. So might actually be a somewhat fun team to play with, but yeah, I'm not going to really go anywhere in this fictional tournament that we're going to start once all the teams are done. So next team up on the Southeast Division would be... Lost my place here real quick. Okay, the Orlando Magic. Let's go ahead and get to them. Move over a few. This was kind of a tricky team because, no duplicates, so you're not going to get a Shaq. And Tracy McGrady, theoretically could have put him on the Rockets, but went with the Magic. I think his best season overall was with the Magic, so that's what we did. That's the 03 season for Tracy McGrady. Dwight Howard probably could have won an MVP in 2011, but did not, so this is 2011 version of Dwight Howard. There's a couple of different versions you could have gone with, but we chose that one. Penny Hardaway, unfortunately, had to change his number because T-Mac took number 1, so I think we made him number 7 once the image pops up. You guys get to see it, but this is a 1996 version of Penny Hardaway. I think we made him 11. Yeah, that's what it was. So it looks somewhat like 1. But Hedo Turkoglu, had to create him actually because he's not in the game anymore. Used to be, but so kind of frustrating. Rashard Lewis, another creative player. I thought we did a pretty good job with this one. I think that looks pretty good. We also added him to the 2013 Heat because for whatever reason he's not on the game this year, and the 2013 Heat didn't have him either. So here's Rashard Lewis, and this is the 09 version, that great season of the Magic. And that's also Hedo Turkoglu's season. I don't think I mentioned that yet. Same as Jameer Nelson, 09 version of Jameer Nelson. So his lone All-Star season. Nick Anderson, 1995 version of Nick Anderson. So that was easy. That team is on the game, so just moved him over. Dennis Scott. This is the 1996 version, so made him a little bit better than the 95 version. Scott Skiles. This is a edited player. And, I thought he definitely deserved to make the team. He'll be the backup point guard. This is a 1993 version of Scott Skiles. Well, him and Jameer Nelson look kind of battle for the backup point guard. Horace Grant. Could have been on the Bulls, but we decided to go with the Magic in the end. The Bulls just had a little bit more depth. So, Horace Grant, this 1995 version of Horace Grant. Aaron Aflalo. This was a stretch, but went ahead and put him on the team. 2013 version of Aaron Aflalo. Nick Vucevic. Probably going to make him a little bit better. This is the 2017 version, so I think his update, he's gotten a little bit better, so we will probably do that before the tournament starts. Victor Oladipo, again, back into the bench, a little bit desperate. So got Victor Oladipo 2016 version, because we obviously couldn't choose the current version because he's not on the Magic anymore, so went back a year. Brian Shaw. 1996 version of Brian Shaw, and that rounds out the Orlando Magic's roster. So this team actually, I like the starting lineup. you can do some different things. You could go maybe Hito Turkoglu up at the 4 and then start Rashard Lewis, or give Scott Skiles a few more minutes at point guard. Where's Rashard Lewis here? We got to get him up in this. We got to get him some minutes. I forgot I hadn't done this yet. So sorry, D Scott. We're going to take away some of yours and give them to Rashard Lewis. So yeah, I could see a situation where someone want to play with them and start. That's way too many minutes for Brian Shaw. Let's see here. Add some more Rashard. Switch that. Switch that. All right, so Rashard should be the 6th man. What am I doing? You guys are getting a glimpse of like what I have to deal with all these roster like changes and things like that. So that looks more like it. So Penny Hardaway, Trace McGrady, Hito Turkoglu, Horace Grant, Dwight Howard is your starting lineup. Really, you could cobble together a really nice defensive pairing with Horace Grant and rebounding pairing with Horace Grant and Dwight Howard. But then you could also kind of switch this out, go small, spread the floor around Dwight, and really have something there too. And obviously, great point guard play, and you have a go-to scorer for any situation with T-Mac. So it's a nice team. I mean, again, the bench is a little bit weak, like Miami, but I actually like this team a little bit more than Miami. And another team that just hasn't been around as long. So not as much to choose from. And obviously, when you lose like a Shaq, because we can't have duplicates, that hurts as well. So, I'm missing 1 minute here. Let's give it to Dwight. Why not? So yeah, there's the Orlando Magic, and we have one more team here in the Southeast Division, and it's the last team in the alphabet, at least of the 30 NBA teams. It's the Washington Wizards. This is the most recent team that I finished. Let's go ahead and go through them, and then we'll get you out of here. So, Washington Wizards were kind of a tough team because you have the Bullets era. There's good eras of this team, and they end up being pretty solid, but the players, like, their overalls really aren't separated by much, as you can see here, and it's kind of hard to build the rotation exactly how you want it. It's some really good point guards. Had to create more players than I would have liked on this team, but let's go ahead and get going with Earl Monroe. Decided not put him on the Knicks. His better seasons were with the Bullets, Bullets, now Wizards. And this is 1968 version of Earl Monroe, Black Jesus, as they call him. Wes Unseld, this is an edited player. 1969 version of Wes Unseld. Elvin Hayes, another edited player, but I thought that looked quite a bit like him, so went ahead and went with that. That's 1975 version of Elvin Hayes. Unseld is probably overrated historically, but did have a couple really good seasons, including an MVP year, so went ahead and gave Unseld at 89, same as Elvin Hayes. Walt Bellamy, another big, gonna be kind of a 3-man big rotation, but this is a 1964 version of Walt Bellamy. John Wall, current version, and he will be a little bit better too once we get started. So he actually might end up being the best player on this team if he goes up anymore. He's been playing like a monster recently. This is recording this on January 29th, 2017. So he's been awesome. Gilbert Arenas, created player, which is a real shame that he's not on the game. At least a playable version of him. This is the 06 version of Gilbert Arenas because I feel like he would be really fun on this game. Jerry Stackhouse, another creative player. Really kind of a hard face to do and hard, kind of like skin tone, body type, it's a little bit different, but I thought we did okay in the end, and definitely deserved to be on this team. He was great in 2003, so that's the version we chose. Rod Strickland, another creative player, gave him the Kyrie Irving layup package. I think this one looks pretty good, and it looks pretty cool. Let's actually look at him kind of in the edit player here. Did you kind of like roll around? I think it's gonna look awesome. Gave him the Air Max. Got his little wristband on, or wrist wrap on there, so that's gonna look pretty fun to play with. And his ISO like crossovers look similar to him in real life. Great ball handler. He's gonna be fun. Although I can get a lot of minutes behind all these point guards, so maybe I won't play with him too much. Phil Chenier, another creative player. I thought this one looked pretty solid. 1975 version of Phil Chenier. Gus Johnson, another creative player. The sideburns are perfect for him. If you guys want to look up a picture of Gus Johnson, I think that one looks pretty solid. So this is 1971 version of Gus Johnson. This is kind of the glory days of the Bullets / Wizards franchise. Juwan Howard, another creative player. This is probably the last one I did, actually. Which version of Juwan Howard did we choose? 1997. There he is. Also another guy who was like a little bit tough, but I think it'll be pretty fun to play with. As you can see, this is a deep team. Caron Butler also made the cut. Had an All-Star appearance. This is the 08 version of Caron Butler. Larry Hughes was on the 07 Cavs, so that was easy. Just traded him over. Caron Butler's in the free agent pool, by the way. So, there's Larry Hughes, 05 version of Larry Hughes, his last season with the Wizards. Kevin Porter, another creative player, or edited player, actually. And when I say edited player, I mean we're editing from another player who kind of looked like him, and so it just doesn't take quite as much time. I mean, this is obviously a massive project and a huge time commitment, so anywhere to save time. It's not going to ever look perfect for anyone, but we want to get the best of our ability without while maintaining some sort of life, and so that's kind of the thinking behind that. But this is 1975 version of Kevin Porter. Bradley Beal, current version, and this also will probably get a little bit better. He's been playing lights out recently, so he's looks like he's the worst on the roster now, but he might catch up. So if that's your worst on your roster, that's pretty good. So let's look at the rotation before we get out of here. This is what we're going with as of now, but this obviously can change. As you can see, the minute distribution up there on the top, it looks crazy just because of how many good point guards are on this roster. It was tough to distribute those minutes out properly, and there's only one nominal small forward, and it's Caron Butler. So the rest of them are all listed as shooting guards or point guards. So it's gonna be tough to kind of manage the minutes of this team, but it's gonna be fun. So we started Earl Monroe as the point guard. Gilbert Arenas would start as the 2 guard. You can go a number of ways there, but Jerry Stack also starts as the 3. Elvin Hayes as the 4, and Wes Unseld as the 5. John Wall off the bench. Obviously, you could easily start. You could even do this. Play Earl Monroe as the 2. John Wall as the 1, and but I think most people are going to want to start Gilbert Arenas, so that's what we're going to do to start. Walt Bellamy, Rod Strickland, Caron Butler, Juwan Howard, Gus Johnson, Phil Chenier, Kevin Porter, Larry Hughes, and Bradley Beal. So Hughes and Beal will be in the reserves because I just don't see how they're going to get minutes. There's so many good wings on this team and so many good shooting guards. So going to be a fun team to play with. They have a rich history and had some glory days in the 70s, including a championship, and had some really good years in the mid-2000s. They were losing to LeBron every year in the playoffs, and then now obviously have the great duo of Wall and Beal. So I thought both of those guys deserved to make the team, and this is going to be a fun team. So there is the Southeast Division. Let us know in the comments of either YouTube or the website if we missed anybody, or if you're liking these videos, if they're too long, too short, if you want more explanation of some of this stuff. But they're really fun for us, and it's a big time kind of nerd out of basketball history, and by the time this is done, it's going to be a really, really cool project. And I'm excited to get on the court and actually play with some of these teams. I haven't really played with any of them. I'm waiting to kind of finish the whole project. So, thanks for listening, guys, and be looking out for the next one. Don't know which division we're going to finish first, but we have 3 more. So we're completely done with half of the league, and then there's just some editing of the players and creating a few more guys for the other teams. So we're getting close, and then we'll start playing with these teams. We'll probably make some videos out of that. But thanks for joining us, and check out Basketball Pantheon for new stuff. Thanks.